What's going on, guys? Welcome to Steve Does Stuff. I'm Steve, and today we've been doing some more 1JZ Foxbody stuff. So last time you saw this car, it was sort of running, sort of driving. Then I put it up on jack stands and turned it into a car that not only doesn't run, it doesn't move. Transmission is on the floor, and this thing ain't got no wheels or no driveline. My main reason for taking the transmission out of this was previous owner said it was slipping. Out of an abundance of caution, I pulled the transmission out of it, pulled the Collins Adapter flywheel, clutch, and pressure plate out of it. We're going to be inspecting the old Collins Adapter flywheel, pressure plate, and clutch, and replacing it with a new one. So as a refresher, it is a JZ32 transmission. That is bolted into a Ford Foxbody hatchback. So the kit itself, I would peg it roughly 7 years old. It's been through 4 owners, and I don't know much about it. I don't really trust the guy who sold it to me, so I'm glad I pulled it out. This beautiful little kit is about $1,700. Now there is an adapter plate under there bolted to the motor that allows that transmission to bolt to that motor. While the adapter plate is still in there, I wanted to show you a little bit more in detail the clutch and the flywheel because I was really curious. So this is the big money. This is like the custom flywheel from Collins Adapters that is spaced properly, so it works with the 2JZ starter and it works with all of the clutch pieces for a Z32 transmission. Collins Adapter's official statement on this is do not use any clutch that we do not sell you, but kind of a sucker for punishment, and their clutches are like $800 US versus I can get a Rock Auto clutch for an NA 300ZX clutch pressure plate, throwout bearing, and pilot bearing for like $200. I did the stupid thing and didn't listen to them. The clutch that I pulled out of this was slipping, and while I never really drove it on the street much, I do know it was slipping. This is the friction disc on the Collins Adapter flywheel. Fortunately, it is serviceable, so I have ordered another one. But you can see this little ridge on the very back, so that means there has been a clutch that is not this clutch that has really dug its way into this friction surface. Chatted with Brett from Collins Adapters. He said every time you change a clutch, you gotta get a new friction surface. Fortunately, the friction surface is $150. So the clutch, however, is a very interesting one. So it's an Exetti clutch. It's full face organic on the transmission side, but then it is like an 8-puck carbon ceramic, not sure what it is. The reason I know this was slipping is because width of these are bigger than this channel. So you can see this lip right here. This is the original wear surface from the first clutch that was on it. This ridge right here was where the original clutch rode. This worn ridge, or this worn area that is above that ridge, is the primary surface where this clutch was engaging. So you can see right here, there is this tiny little ridge. So that means whomever put this clutch in, this 8-puck side is only riding on this much of the actual friction surface until this wears away enough and everything starts to grab. Regardless, it's not a recipe for success. Anytime you put something on, you want as much clamping and as much friction as you can possibly get to stop it from slipping. This Exetti clutch was always set up to fail because this friction surface was not changed. As far as the pressure plate, the only thing that I could find with it was this little wonky tooth, which, like, I am no expert. I don't think that is really going to affect the clamping force of it. I truly believe that this worn friction disc combined with this brand new clutch was not seating properly. Pressure plate itself, not bad at all. So before I get into the new parts, I have to fix the old parts, because when I was taking the pressure plate and clutch off the flywheel, I just so happened to snap a bolt off in there, which really sucks. First things first, let's extract this bolt. A little more off than I wanted it to be. Basically dead center. Threads might need a quick chase, but I wouldn't say I technically know what I'm doing. Oh, we got turnage. Yes. One bolt extracted. Now that we got the bolts out of this guy, it's time to change out this friction disc. So we ordered another one from Collins Adapters, about $150 US. And this guy is gonna drop right in place. So Brett includes all new hardware with it. He's telling you to crank it down to basically 6 pound-feet using crisscross pattern. Have to make sure we clean the bottom surface of this really well so it sits nice and flat, and then crisscross applesauce it so it's gonna sit down nice and flat. I'm gonna go to town on this thing with some brake cleaner and just get after it. Once this is all cleaned up and done, I'm gonna chase each one of these threads too, just to avoid any issues when we're trying to bolt our new clutch to it. Right now it's my lunch break and I am spending it with a tap and die set because I am chasing out these threads. Previous flywheel bolt snapped off in the hole, and then all the other holes are looking pretty junky. Like the threads are pretty hashed. They're not looking the best. So I'm taking an M by 125 tap right there, chasing these threads out just so these new bolts will fit in here a little bit nicer. You can see that they're not really the best. So I'm just kind of taking the time, gently working these out, cleaning these threads up, and they are looking much nicer. That is our friction disc on there, torqued to spec, which the spec is surprisingly low. It says 6 pound-feet in a crisscross pattern. Boy, oh boy, am I suspicious of that. Still need to get the Collins Adapter pilot bearing out of there. And that is under the car. So let's go under and take a look at that. Our next step is getting this piece out of here. You see right here, there's this little lip. I'm gonna see if I can get a claw on here to just pop this bearing out, maybe hit it with a little bit of heat, loosen some things up. Rear main, again, not a BMW. That's what they're supposed to look like, eh? So we're getting the pilot bearing out. We are shit out of luck on pullers. So we're gonna use some bread instead. We're gonna use the bread trick. Basically fill up the space behind the pilot bearing with bread, slam this bolt in here, just keep repeating until it starts to work its way out. How many pieces of bread will fit in here? Okay, so went through a few iterations of this and how to try and make this work properly. Tried a couple different bolts and they didn't really work out well. Had these really nice bolts. I think they're old flywheel bolts. These guys right here. And fortunately, this was not big enough. This was too big. So what I ended up doing is taking a grinder and then totally grinding off the head of it so it fits like perfectly inside of that throwout bearing. And this is an oil impregnated bronze bearing. So this is what's gonna get it out. I can only hope. I think we're getting close. Okay, so one slice of bread did all this. It's not bad. You really got a whale on it, which I wasn't totally prepared for. Suck it. All right, come on. Oh, look at that. Well, that's what the inside looks like. Sick. So here she is. This is the aluminum pilot bearing adapter. She sits in the crank, and inside of here is that oil impregnated bronze sleeve, of which the new M-Pact came with. Hey, how are we gonna get this bearing out of it? Well, glad somebody asked. I am probably going to take yet another bolt and round it off so it fits in there perfectly, and press this thing out into the vise, probably into a socket. I think that's gonna be the way to do it. The issue that I ran into is this one is just a little bit smaller. The input shaft of the transmission sits, you can see right in there, there's a ridge. So that ridge is, it fits very tight in here, but it was extremely loose at the top. So I had to make this big one to pack down into the ridge. You can see this one won't go any further. Then get this little one for the snugger internal part to just really hammer it home. But now it is time to turn one of these guys into a very round bearing press. I wouldn't officially recommend this. There we go. It's easy money. All right, so here's the new and old pilot bearings for this thing. Still want to check on the transmission input shaft. Oh, moment of truth. Not super sexy, but the vise is doing a good job. Got a little bit of heat, caught the board on fire, but you can see just how easily freed things up. So obviously I'm not going to touch that, but that is one done pilot bearing. Okay, so this is actually going better than I thought it would. Pilot bearing is replaced, pilot bearing adapter is in, went in pretty smoothly, and now it's time to put the flywheel back in. These are the bolts that hold the flywheel into the back of the crank. Apparently on JZ's, the stock ones can crack, not that good. So these are ARPs, they've been replaced. I'm hoping they're not torque to yield. It's only about 50 to 60 pound-feet for these bolts. So it says red Loctite, all I've got's blue. One step closer for sure, which is really great. Per the Collins adapter instructions, we're gonna throw our flywheel on here, put the spacer behind it, which I already forgot, put our bolts in, tighten them in 20-pound increments in a crisscross thread pattern, and of course we're gonna put some Loctite on it. Shout out to whichever colorblind son of a bitch made this decision. I go to the store looking for red Loctite, see the red bottle, okay, it's gotta be red. What's wrong with you? You're what's wrong with society today. Like a son of a fucking bitch. Because of Loctite's incompetence, it's getting blue. Final torque, 65 pound-feet. Lay into the secret sauce on these last few. It's not pretty. Screwdriver in the bolt. Okay. Yeah. So this is an M-Pact 6-puck sprung ceramic clutch. Now this is not what Collins recommends running. A friend of mine runs this in his Turbo 86, Brett. I'm sure you see him on the channel, and he has had a ton of good luck with this. So this is supposed to hold like 200 or 300% more torque than a NA 300ZX has. So here's hoping it's going to be enough. Everything should be the same. So let's hope. Get to a place here and you think, okay, how smoothly is this clutch alignment tool going in? And right now it's getting hung up on that pilot bearing in there. So if that's this difficult with a clutch alignment tool, imagine how difficult it is when you're going to be bench pressing this transmission into there. I'm going to see if I can improve this angle a little bit, because if I go in there too fast with the input shaft, I'm going to mush that bronze bearing potentially, and then if that input snub does not fit in there, I am so unbelievably fucked, it's not even funny. So this little beauty is hopefully incorrectly. Looking good. It's cranked down, it's torqued down, and this is just buttery smooth. So hopefully that is gonna make my life a little easier when it comes time to slam the transmission back into this thing, which is something that is fast approaching. The throw bearing in this thing is pretty darn good. What is not very good is whatever happened here. Now, this was not on the latest clutch, that is for sure, but it was on a clutch and hasn't affected the input shaft. This thing still looks pretty good. I don't know if that's within spec or not. I don't really know anything, but I do know this ridge is stopping me from getting this off. So this has got to come out. So I'm just going to take a file and knock this down and then clean all the metal shavings out of here. This guy is cleaned up. Let's try and break this guy off. Ooh. Nice. piece. I have a new bearing, so you might as well just change it. Looks like it's press fit onto here, so I'm gonna tap this out of the old one and tap the new one in. Nothing fancy, just set the vise up so it's just a little bit wider than the piece we're trying to hit out. Take my handy dandy 36mm socket, place it in there, just hit it alternating sides nice and light until this piece pops out. 30mm socket is the exact right size. So we got old on the left. This has actually got part numbers and country of origins on there. Not a whole lot on this one. We're gonna pound that cast piece into this guy. Slam it on, grease it up. Whew. Okay, our new throwout bearing back on our transmission. Transmission is on the floor, ready to go in. Now when I pulled this down, I had Rhett with me, and part of doing that was we basically had to unbolt the K-member, drop it so we could get at it. Now I don't have Rhett, so I'm a little hesitant to do that. So there should be 4 bolts per side, 2 here, 2 here. Currently I have 1, with a questionable amount of thread showing. And you may have noticed, hey, that's not part of a car. Well, you're right, it's wood. And it's there to keep this engine as rocked back as possible. So I'm hoping with that, it's gonna give me the best possible angle to slide the input shaft in, get her nutted up on the bottom, and then I'll just whoosh, pick her back up. Doors open in case this thing comes crashing down and kills me. I've got wheels under almost every side. So we're just gonna see what happens. X, kind of check. Oh, come on. That was unreal. Wow. Holy shit, that was fast. This is the part of the program where I tell you about due diligence and I tell you to do your due diligence. Let me explain. On the very tippity top, there's a bolt way up there. And Rhett and I fought it. We dropped the subframe, scary. We messed around for far too long. Got the transmission out, all good. Then we gotta start taking the wiring out, rooting around under the dash, and you're never gonna guess what we found after saying, we should just cut a hole. And what do I find behind the dash? A nice little hole to access the world's worst transmission bolt. So whoever you are, you're a hero to me, sir. Completely new drive shaft that I totally rebuilt with Tremclad spray paint. Vice Grip Garage reference. If you don't know it, you should. So, and okay, that just broke. Despite an unprecedented victory yesterday, we've got an issue. That is one of the pucks of the clutch, and it is spinning as I spin the drive shaft. And that is a problem because, well, that transmission is in gear. So, yeah, we're in a slippy clutch situation when we shouldn't, which is very interesting. And that could be because perhaps the slave cylinder is not the right throw. Perhaps the fingers on this pressure plate are too long. Or perhaps it's because I should have listened to Brett at Collins Adapters. This requires further investigation, which may require us to remove said transmission. So I'm gonna take the clutch slave cylinder off first and see what makes a difference. Well, that's a real come down from yesterday. Got a problem, I gotta take the transmission out again. Fortunately, I'm getting pretty good at it. Obviously, first thing, I didn't listen. Didn't listen to Brett at Collins Adapters when he says, only use our clutches. I know he doesn't make clutches, he's just spec'd the right ones. Rolled the dice, took a guess, got burned. Basically what is happening is there is too much pressure on the pressure plate and it is not getting all the clamping force into the clutch. I know that because it was almost impossible to get the slave cylinder on there. That should have been cue number one. With the transmission in gear, I can spin the drive shaft. That's not how clutches work. So took the slave cylinder off, thinking, maybe it's a throw issue with this one. And hey, it's looking pretty good. Put it in first, no problem. Second, no problem. Third, no problem. Fourth, getting a little spinny. Fifth, a little spinny. So again, that should not be happening. So basically that tells me that I have messed something up in my guesstimations, that whatever is happening, it feels like that throwout bearing is already pressing into the fingers on the clutch some way, somehow, and is releasing some of the pressure plate on it. So that's my best guess. I've consulted the fellows, and the fellows have unanimously said, unfortunately, it's time to suck it up, take your ball, go home, and pull the transmission out of the Mustang yet again. So I'm gonna do that, and let's see what we find. All right, so here's the deal. M-Pact clutch that I bought from Rock Auto will not fit, and it was for a reason that I did not see coming. I'll do my best to explain this, but I'm basically still working through the weeds on that. So this is the original South Bend clutch that came on the car. This is the M-Pact clutch for a Z32 NA transmission. As you can see, we're basically the same height. In fact, the M-Pact is actually a little bit lower. However, where I ran into issues was the height of the actual clamping surface. So for whatever reason, this has a more shallow height between the clamping surface and the actual mounting surface. This on the M-Pact, as you can see, it's quite deep. This is over a 1/4 inch. This is about 3/16 inch difference between the mounting surface and the clamping surface. What I understand to be happening is, with this big space right in here, we are unfortunately not getting the fingers to go fully straight. So when we put the transmission on, throwout bearing is already pressing up against these fingers because there isn't enough, or there's too much space to prevent them from going totally straight. So unfortunately, this pressure plate will not work. Now, I know this one works, but it's seen better days. It's not terrible, like, don't get me wrong, it's not bad, but I've got this guy. There's a couple things that I think will work about this one. It's slightly more shallow than the M-Pact, and I believe it's even more shallow than the South Bend. And beyond that, the space from the clamping surface to the mounting surface is 1/8 of an inch. So this is 3/16, that is a 1/4 inch, this is 1/8 of an inch. So this means we have the thinnest possible pressure plate with the smallest possible difference between the clamping and mounting surface, which means when we clamp this to the flywheel, this is gonna get squeezed the most, it's gonna have the most clamping power, and these fingers will be the most sucked in. I don't know if that's gonna work. I'm really hoping it's gonna work because I'm an idiot and I didn't listen to Brett. Been talking to people who know more about this stuff than I do. We're looking like it's gonna work. But before we get crazy and bolt this whole thing up, turn the car on and realize the clutch is still slipping, I'm gonna do a little bit more due diligence this time. So I'm gonna mount the comp pressure plate with the M-Pact clutch, first of all. First test I can do is really kind of bolt it up so the clutch is sliding around in there, but not super sloppy. See what that distance is. If that distance is greater than what I saw on the other ones, I know I'm gonna have more clamping force. I'll go ahead, nut that up. Then I'm gonna slide the transmission on there, 2 bolts in, see if I can get the slave cylinder on. When I was trying to put the slave cylinder on with the M-Pact, I literally could not. I could get 1 bolt in, but it was so far slammed forward, the clutch fork, that I just could not get it in there. So that goes in well. Then I'm gonna throw the transmission into gear, put the drive shaft in, see if I can turn it. If that goes well, I think we're just gonna roll the dice. And it is worth noting that I could get all the way bolted back up, wiring in, new dash, ready to go, and it slips. So probably wouldn't recommend this, but that's what we're gonna do. Okay, pressure plate is in, which is good. Fingers on the pressure plate are like straight up and down, which is pretty close, but that should give us the space we need for the throw bearing. If they are starting to point in towards the clutch, you've essentially overthrown your pressure plate and there won't be a lot of clamping force. So it seems like we're either going to be too far one way or on the borderline the other way. So checked the throw bearing, the new one against the old one. They are identical. The throw bearing is pressed onto that little cast piece perfectly, and the fork is on the socket, like the pivot ball. So all that's left to do now is slide this transmission on, get it bolted up one or two bolts, throw it into gear, put the shaft on, and just see if it spins. Okay. Holy shit, she ain't happy now. Okay, so that was way more of a fight than it was before, which, as I understand it, could be a good thing. That means the clutch is getting grabbed good and hard. Got 3 out of 4 bolts on the transmission right now. The final test is going to be putting in a 5th gear and seeing if it slips. Then the second test is going to be how easy does the slave cylinder go on. So if all those things are good, we can finally put the trans to bed. So here goes nothing. Shifter is hooked up. That's a 5th gear. Obviously, I'm not strong enough to simulate a 3,000 pound car trying to move, but I mean, I am pretty strong. All right, let's see. So, ready? Okay, that's good. Let's reverse. Okay, test number 1's good. Final test. Car is in gear. That's first gear. Clutch, depressed. That's my bionic leg. Okay, drive shaft is hooked up. Sounds like we got ourselves a clutch, pressure plate, and flywheel, gentlemen. So it's been probably a month with this thing on jack stands. Comp stage 5 pressure plate, M-Pact 6-puck sprung ceramic clutch, and a Collins flywheel with a fresh friction surface is a winning combination for this so far. Hasn't driven under its own power, but I've done all the due diligence I can. Now it's time for an epic montage to get all of this cleaned back up. We got a K-member hanging by a thread. We've got no trans mounts. We got 2 out of the 4 bolts. It's time to let her rip, Tater Chip, and get this puppy nutted up. Let's do it. So that was an absolute mission to get that in. Certainly learned a lot of things along the way, but everything is bolted up into the Mustang now. We've got a fresh friction surface on the flywheel from Collins. We've got a 6-puck sprung ceramic clutch in there. We've got a stage 5 comp pressure plate in there. Everything I've done so far looks like it's gonna hold, but we're not really gonna know until we get this thing running and driving. I think we will be all right, but it remains to be seen. So the driveline is officially buttoned up on this thing. And that is going to do it for this episode of Steve Does Stuff. Thanks for watching, guys. Appreciate it very much. See you next time.